There's a specific look every parent knows. Your baby, completely still, eyes locked onto your face, not blinking, not glancing away, just staring with an intensity that somehow makes a grown adult feel a little self-conscious. Most of us just laugh, maybe make a silly face back, maybe wonder if something's wrong with the baby or with us. But for the last 20 years, researchers studying the developing brain have been asking a much bigger question about that exact stare. And what they've found doesn't just explain a strange baby habit. It reframes what's actually happening between two people, one of whom can't even talk yet, every single time they lock eyes with you. It's worth pausing on just how strange this behavior actually is once you stop and think about it. Adults who stare at each other without speaking, without breaking eye contact for long stretches, tend to make each other deeply uncomfortable. There's an entire unspoken social rulebook around how long eye contact is supposed to last before it starts to feel confrontational or strange. Babies seem to have skipped that rulebook entirely, and it turns out that's not an accident or an oversight in their development. It's closer to the opposite. A fully intact, fully functioning system doing exactly the job evolution built it to do, long before social rules about eye contact ever get layered on top of it. Let's clear up the obvious explanation first, because it's the one most people assume without ever checking it. The theory goes, babies stare because their eyesight is bad, and faces just happen to be the closest, most contrasty thing around. And there's a grain of truth buried in there. A newborn's visual range really is short, somewhere around 8 to 12 inches, which happens to line up almost exactly with the distance between your face and theirs while you're holding them. So early on, sure, faces might simply be what's in focus, but that explanation falls apart fast. By around 3 months old, a baby's visual range has expanded enough to take in an entire room. The ceiling, a window, a pet wandering past, a pile of laundry in the corner, and they still choose your face over and over out of everything else available to look at. That's not blurry vision anymore. That's a preference. Researchers testing infant visual preference have found this pattern holds up even when the room is genuinely full of colorful, moving, objectively more visually interesting things than a still human face. A baby will still redirect their gaze back to a person over almost anything else on offer. And once researchers started asking why that preference exists and what's actually happening in a baby's brain during it, the answers got a lot stranger than anyone expected. In 2017, a research team based at the University of Cambridge published a study in one of the most respected scientific journals in the world, examining what happens inside two separate brains, an infant's and an adult's, during direct face-to-face interaction, using a brain imaging method called functional near-infrared spectroscopy, which can track neural activity without needing a baby to sit still inside a scanner. They were hunting for something specific, whether two brains could actually synchronize their activity in real time. What they found was striking enough to get attention across the entire field. When a baby and an adult made direct eye contact, their brainwaves began to align, the same frequencies, the same rhythmic patterns, firing across two completely separate nervous systems at the same time. When the adult looked away instead, that synchronization vanished. A neutral, unengaged expression produced only a weak, partial echo of it. But direct mutual gaze, actual eye contact, produced the strongest coupling between two different brains the researchers had recorded in that line of work. Your baby isn't simply looking at you when they stare. In a very real, measurable sense, their developing brain is syncing with yours, borrowing your neural activity as a kind of scaffolding to help build its own. It's worth sitting with how unusual that finding actually is in the broader landscape of neuroscience. Most brain research studies one brain at a time, in isolation. This particular line of research had to invent new methods just to study two brains simultaneously, in real time, precisely because eye contact between a caregiver and an infant turned out to be one of the few naturally occurring situations where that kind of cross-brain coordination shows up this clearly and this strongly. Here's where it gets even more counterintuitive, though. Babies don't actually stare at every face the same way, and the pattern isn't what you'd guess. In a study out of Harvard Medical School, researchers showed 3-month-old infants two faces side by side, a complete stranger and their primary caregiver. You'd expect the baby to fixate longest on the familiar face, the one they know and love. Instead, infants consistently stared longer at the stranger. Once you understand the underlying mechanism, It actually makes perfect sense. Psychologists call this a violation of expectation response. Babies devote more visual attention to things they haven't fully figured out yet. A stranger's face is new information, something to be processed, cataloged, understood. Your face, by 3 months, has already been studied for what amounts to thousands of hours. Every micro-expression, every shift in tone, every subtle movement already logged and mostly familiar. When your baby looks at you specifically, they're not confused. They're reading you, checking in, gathering the latest update rather than starting from scratch. This is also part of why a baby might occasionally seem to study a new visitor with unnerving intensity while barely glancing at you across the same room. It isn't rudeness or preference reversal. It's simply their attention allocating itself toward whichever face currently holds the most unresolved information. That reading ability develops faster than most parents realize. Researchers at the University of Washington found that by 5 months old, babies can already tell the difference between a genuine smile and a forced, fake one, picking up on subtleties most adults barely register consciously. By around 6 months, babies are actively using your emotional expressions to decide how to respond to the world around them, something developmental psychologists call social referencing. Show fear on your face near something new, and your baby tends to freeze or pull back. Show excitement, and they lean in and reach for it. Stay calm and neutral, and they go ahead and explore on their own. That long, unblinking stare isn't passive admiration. It's active data collection, your baby building a live, constantly updating emotional map of your face, and using that map to figure out what's safe in the world and what isn't. In a very literal sense, you're not just a parent to your baby. You're functioning as an external processing system for their still developing nervous system. This has a practical implication. Most parents never hear stated this directly. Your own facial expression during an uncertain moment isn't just a reaction to how you feel. It's actively shaping how your baby interprets that same moment. A steady, calm face during a loud noise or a new experience genuinely changes the outcome for your baby's nervous system, not just their behavior in that instant. There's one experiment in particular that shook the field of developmental psychology hard enough to spark years of ethical discussion about how far researchers should go to study this. It's known as the still face paradigm, first designed in 1975 by the psychologist Edward Tronick at Harvard. The setup itself is almost deceptively simple. A mother sits face to face with her infant and interacts completely normally, smiling, talking, responding to whatever the baby does. The baby, predictably, is delighted, fully engaged, staring up with total focused attention. Then, on a signal, the mother's face goes completely still. No expression, no response. Her eyes stay open, but there's nothing happening behind them anymore. What unfolds over the next 2 minutes is one of the most replicated, most studied behavioral sequences in the entire field. The baby notices almost instantly that something's wrong. They try everything in their toolkit to bring their mother back. Big smiles, pointing, excited sounds, all the moves that normally work like clockwork. Nothing happens. So they escalate, bigger gestures, louder vocalizations, more urgency. Still nothing. Within about 90 seconds, most infants begin showing real physiological stress, measurable cortisol spikes, elevated heart rate. Some start to cry outright. Others do something even more telling. They go flat themselves, shutting down emotionally in a way that almost mirrors their mother's blank expression. Some infants also turn their bodies away entirely, as if withdrawing from a conversation partner who stopped participating, a strikingly adult-like response for someone only a few months old. The moment the mother re-engages, recovery does happen, but it isn't instant. It takes real time for the baby's system to fully settle back down. Tronick spent decades studying this pattern, and his core conclusion was this: babies aren't passive little recipients quietly absorbing care from the sidelines. They're active participants in an ongoing emotional exchange, and that exchange runs almost entirely through the face. That stare was never about admiration or confusion. It's communication, at its most basic and most essential level. Your baby is talking to you through their eyes, and their entire system is built to expect you to talk back. Tronick's work has since been replicated many times over, in different labs, with different populations, and the core pattern holds up consistently, which is part of why it remains one of the most cited studies in all of developmental psychology, decades after it was first designed. There's a deeper layer to all of this that rarely gets discussed outside academic circles, And it has to do with what's actually being constructed inside a baby's brain during all of this staring, beyond the emotional connection itself. Researchers in MIT's Brain and Cognitive Sciences department have spent years studying exactly how infants process visual and social information, and one of their findings genuinely reshapes how we think about early brain development. Babies who receive more contingent, responsive face-to-face interaction in the first 6 months of life, meaning their cues consistently get noticed and answered, show measurably stronger development in the prefrontal cortex. That's the region responsible for planning, decision-making, emotional regulation, and complex social behavior, essentially the architecture that runs the rest of adult cognitive life. Being looked at and looking back isn't just a sweet bonding ritual. It's literal construction work, laying down the physical circuitry your child will rely on for the rest of their life, one shared gaze at a time. What makes this finding especially notable is the word contingent, doing the heavy lifting in that research. It isn't simply about clocking hours of proximity or time spent in the same room. It's specifically about responsiveness, a baby's coo getting answered, a baby's gaze getting met, a baby's reach getting acknowledged. Passive presence and active responsiveness appear to build very different things in a developing brain, even when the total time spent together looks identical from the outside. Now, there's a warning worth sitting with here too, because there is one. If you notice a baby who consistently avoids eye contact, doesn't track faces, or seems to look past people rather than at them, that pattern isn't just a personality quirk to shrug off. Reduced or absent gaze behavior in infancy is one of the earliest observable signals researchers associate with atypical social development. That doesn't automatically mean something is wrong. Every baby genuinely develops on their own individual timeline, and plenty of variation falls well within normal. But pediatric researchers are consistent on one point: early identification changes outcomes. The brain's plasticity during the first 2 years of life is at its absolute peak and never quite reaches that level again. Interventions started at 6 months tends to produce results that interventions started at 2 years simply can't fully replicate. So if something about a baby's gaze, or the lack of it, quietly nags at you, that instinct is worth trusting. You've likely spent more hours reading that particular face than anyone else on Earth, which makes you a genuinely well-calibrated instrument for noticing when something's off, long before any formal assessment would. This isn't a call to panic over the occasional distracted glance or a single overtired evening where a baby seems less engaged than usual. Every baby has off moments. It's specifically about a consistent, ongoing pattern over time, and if you notice one, mentioning it to your pediatrician costs nothing and closes off no other possibilities. It simply opens the door to support earlier rather than later, when that support tends to matter most. So the next time a baby across the room locks eyes with you and just stares, unmoving, unblinking, try to remember what's actually happening underneath that simple moment. There's a genuinely practical piece hiding inside all of this research too, something worth carrying with you beyond just the interesting science. You don't need special training, flashcards, or scheduled activities to give your baby what this entire body of research is describing. You need almost the opposite: ordinary, unhurried moments where your face is actually available, not angled toward a screen, not distracted mid-task, simply present and readable. A few unhurried minutes of real face-to-face attention, repeated often across an ordinary day, appear to matter more than any single elaborate activity ever could. It's also worth remembering that this works in both directions. When your baby stares at you and you meet that gaze, smile back, mirror their expression, you're not interrupting anything or overstimulating them. You're completing a loop. Their brain is actively waiting on you to close. Their brain is reaching out toward yours, using your face as a working model for how to feel, how to read a room, how to figure out what's safe and what isn't, how to eventually exist comfortably in a world full of other people. Evolution didn't hand babies those enormous, expressive eyes by accident. They're arguably the most sophisticated piece of social hardware a human ever comes equipped with. And when one of them locks onto you, there's really only one correct response: stare back.